For our next artworks, I want you to use your imagination and pretend that you are one of the elite French nobility under the reign of Louis XIV. Now, in our last artwork, the portrait, I introduced you to the idea of his absolute monarchy, his control over and watching over all of us. That includes you, especially you, the nobility. Now, he also, I told you in that last video, establishes the larger Royal Academy of Arts. And this is a way for him to harness the power of artists to better serve him and his power. One of his projects during this time is the construction of Versailles. Here we are. This is the Palace of Versailles, and we're looking at in this aerial photo the town of Versailles and a little bit of the woods all around or behind the palace. The lead architects were Charles Lebrun and Jules Hardouin-Mansart. Now, Versailles, it was originally a very small hunting lodge. It's just about a day's ride outside of Paris, and it had been the favorite hunting lodge of Louis XIV's dad. It became also then a favorite space, or you could say a refuge for Louis, and he began reconstructing the Royal Hunting Lodge into this extreme, elaborate palace under the management of Charles Lebrun and Jules Hardouin-Mansart. This was one of the greatest architectural projects of the century, and it was meant to serve, you guessed it, Louis. We are going to look at this in more detail, but just because I like to highlight the power of this monarchy and this palace, it is estimated in today's money that it cost Louis about 100 to 200 billion dollars to build Versailles. And the palace can comfortably house 5,000 people, or I should say 5,000 nobles and 14,000 servants. Huh? Okay. Because you might be one of the elite nobility, but Louis requires you to live at Versailles with him for about 6 months out of the year. If you refuse, then you have to pay a hefty fine. So the palace is outfitted with various apartments for all of the nobility. All of the noble families are expected to pack up their entire families, pack up all of their clothes and their servants, and they are given a series of rooms or apartments in the palace that they have to live there in the company of Louis. They have to attend all of the balls, all of the galas, all of the concerts, all of the ballets, all of the what's the word I'm thinking of? The church masses. They have to be there. Why? Well, have you heard of the phrase, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? That's Louis. That's what he's doing. He's keeping you close so he can keep an eye on you. He's keeping you distracted. He's keeping you busy with all of the expectations put on you so that you don't think, I want to change things. I don't like him. I don't like what he did there. Instead, you're too busy worrying about paying for the next ball gown or elaborate suit for to be made, because you are supposed to dress to impress to everything. You're supposed to have all the latest and greatest in hair and accessories and clothing. You're supposed to be spending all of your money while you're living here with Louis. The entire town of Versailles is built to serve the palace, because think of all the seamstresses, all the laundress, all the stewards, all of the horseshoe makers, all the stables, all the cooks, all the farmers. All of this needs to come from somewhere. So the town is here to serve Louis and the nobility who live here in the palace. Let's go hang out right here in this courtyard, or right in the front courtyard. Now, everything from top to bottom is meant to serve Louis. Every detail, from the doorknobs to the ceiling to the nail heads, are all the finest artisans and craftsmen, and it's all to exhibit the splendor of Louis. Everything that you see that is gold on the outside, that's real gold. Gold, like golden sunlight, yes. And who else is related to the sun? Louis. So we see all of the gold, and we're supposed to understand it to be the wealth of France and the Sun King, Louis. Oh, wow, wow, wow. Look at that. Look at that. Let me get out of the way. Ooh, ah. Ooh, ah. Now, I think this is a video I have. Is this my video? It's going to play. Oh, shoot. I have a video that, if I can remember, I will play it for you. I'll put it beneath this video. I like these to give you a sense of scale. Now just imagine rolling up in your carriage and being greeted by stewards and then having to unpack your entire household to live here for 6 months out of the year. This is my favorite painting of Versailles because it's a modified view and it shows you the original location of the gates. These gates are now gone because of the tour buses, but there was this gilded gate and then a second inner courtyard gate. And then this is the gardens. Now, as I said, this started out as a humble hunting lodge because it had these fantastic woods behind them. And under Louis, we see is this manicured garden space that as you walk farther and farther away, you're supposed to be more and more impressed by the king. These are man-made water reservoirs. There are houses, different cottages, and little things for you to stumble upon as you take your carriage ride or your walk through the gardens. And then as you move farther and farther away, it becomes less manicured, more wild. Look at that. Here we are looking at one room. This room is called the War Room or Salon de la Guerre. And here we see a marble sculpture based on a painting of Louis, and this is Louis after the hunt, and he's victorious. And so here he's getting crowned by the goddess Victory, and there it is. He is victorious in war. Now these floors are all elaborate inlays of wood, and it's extremely expensive, exotic woods. This is marble, this is gold, this is so over the top. It's so Baroque. Everything in this is extreme detail to Louis. Now we will get into one room in particular, the Hall of Mirrors, but I want to, because I always like to do this in my class, I want us to understand the protocol of living here. So you might still be thinking like, oh, it isn't that bad. I'll take living here. Okay. For the nobility, what are you supposed to do? Well, he doesn't want you to be involved in politics. He doesn't want you to think for yourself. So instead, he'll assign you different jobs. Like, and if I were in the class with you, I'd look around and I'd say, your job is to hold his toothbrush in the morning. Ooh, prepare the toothbrush for him. Okay, your job is to hold the toothpaste. You two are so lucky. You get to wake up and you get to smell his morning breath. Oh my gosh. You in the back, you get to brush out his wigs every day. And he has multiple wigs. He has a wig for breakfast. He has a wig for his morning meetings. He has a wig for hunting. He has a wig for after hunting. He has a wig before dinner, during dinner, after dinner. Oh, you get to brush those wigs. You're so lucky. You get to clean his riding boots. Oh, you get to see his sexy legs after he's done with the ride. Ooh, maybe while you're helping him with those riding boots, maybe you can ask for a little cash, maybe a little plot of land. Oh, and then of course you get the very special gift of closing his curtains before he goes to bed every night. You get to see that angel of our Sun King rest. Do you hear? These are the jobs of the nobility. These are the jobs that you are actively seeking. The closer you are to Louis, the more important you must be. The closer you are to Louis, the more you can be like, hey, you want me to pour your wine? Oh, because guess what? That's one of the things. He is not allowed to pour his own wine. So You're pouring his wine and you're like, oh yeah, my sister's sick. It could really use maybe like 100,000. And then he's like, what? Your sister's sick. Give him 100,000. Yes. Or you're like, oh, brushing out his wig. I brush this wig so well because, well, I've always wanted to have 7 wigs. Oh, I'll give you 7 wigs. Yeah, woo. Or you're like, oh, I'm so sorry I was late to come to prepare your toothbrush, but I had to come from so far away. If only I had a plot of land closer to Versailles. I'll give you a plot of land closer. So rather than focusing on these larger global issues, he's keeping you obsessed with the minutia of how to better serve him. Keep your enemies close. Also, before I forget, there is more protocol. Not only is he not allowed to pour his own wine, so he needs official wine pourers, but there is no pointing because that's offensive. It's just like a little penis hanging out everywhere. Women are not allowed to cross their legs because that implies that they have a crotch. Oh, goodness gracious. And what's another thing? Okay, there is this dinner that happens every once in a while. It's called the Grand Couvert, and it's this hours-long meal in which Louis and nobility are invited to a feast of all the greatest of French cuisine. You are all lined into tables, and you face this long stretch of a table where the king and the queen sit. Now, the table is set up with all the food of the meal so that we can all look at it and be like, oh, we're so fantastic, we're so rich, with so much food. But before you can eat, you have to sit there and watch Louis eat. And he starts at one end of the table, and he eats and eats and eats, and then you have a little taste of this, a little taste of that, and you have a little taste of that. And then your stomach's grumbling, and you're waiting, and you have to wait until he's done. A little taste of that, a little taste of that, a little taste of that. To keep you entertained, you're supposed to be sharing news and gossip and entertaining him with song and dance and poetry. He might deem worthy to entertain you with a trick he used to do. He had a boiled egg on a little egg dish, and it would stick out like that. And then he would take out his ceremonial sword and he'd slice off the top. Oh, he's so strong. He's so quick. Slice off the top of the egg. And then we'd all go, oh. It was called egging the egg. And then you get to eat the cold leftovers of Louis. If it doesn't sound unappealing enough, in addition to having to be in these tight corsets, men and women, and these heavy, elaborate costumes, and you're sweating all the time, Versailles stinks so much, and I mean literally stinks, because it was seen as a bad thing to take a bath. You would go for months before you took a bath. Why? Well, it's so ridiculous. Because a hot bath would raise up your blood pressure, and this blood pressure is because of all of the rich food and poor diet and exercise that you have. But they would sit in this hot bath, and then they'd have this high blood pressure, and then they get a heart attack and they die. And they'd be like, oh, it's from the bath. They had a heart attack from the bath. Avoid baths all the time. Also, there weren't many bathrooms in Versailles. I think there was like 2, and they were added later. Instead, where would you go pee and poop? You would go behind a curtain. There would be like these curtained partitions, or there'd be these painted screens, and there'd be a pot behind the screen. So like in the corner here, there'd be a screen, and then you'd be like, oh, excuse me, and you go behind the screen and squat and then pee and poo. And then the whole palace just smelled like urine and feces. After everybody lives here for 6 months, everybody would flee Versailles, and it would get this deep cleaning. It was disgusting. To kind of help you with this stench, the official perfume of Versailles was orange blossoms and rose water. So you're just like dousing yourself in orange blossoms and rose water. Okay, I'm sorry. I got into a lot of the etiquette, but I love it so much. I will see you with our next video about the specific room called the Hall of Mirrors.